Kirk Douglas, the WW2 hero Hollywood tried to forget, but who came back to fight again in the aftermath of heroism. What happens to those who return home, only to be forgotten by the very society they fought to protect? Post-war Los Angeles, 1946, was a city of bright lights and hollow echoes, a place where dreams flickered like the neon signs lining Hollywood Boulevard. Among the vibrant chaos of returning veterans, film studios buzzing with activity, and the bittersweet scent of optimism mingling with trauma, Kirk Douglas stood on the precipice of his aspirations, grappling with the weight of his past. Kirk, a young man with chiseled features that echoed both vulnerability and determination, had recently returned from the front lines of World War II. His blue eyes carried shadows of the battlefield, memories of camaraderie, and loss etched into his very being. As he walked the sun-drenched streets, the sounds of laughter and chatter surrounded him, but it felt like a world apart. He had fought valiantly, but here, in the land of glitz and glamour, his war hero status seemed to hold little weight against the insatiable appetite of Hollywood. The city was alive with the promise of possibility, yet Kirk felt like a ghost among the living, drifting through casting offices where the walls echoed with rejection. The film industry thrived on tales of valor, yet it was the sanitized versions that found favor, stories that glossed over the harsh realities of war, reducing the sacrifices of men like Kirk to mere entertainment. As he navigated the bustling streets, Kirk's thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. "Hey, Kirk!" Frank Matthews, his best friend from the war, waved from across the street. Frank, a rugged man with haunted eyes, wore the invisible scars of battle. The war had changed him, and the weight of his experiences sat heavily on his shoulders. As he approached, Kirk could see the internal struggle etched on Frank's face. "Still trying to make it big?" Frank asked, a half-hearted smile flickering across his lips. Kirk shrugged, the smile fading. "More like trying to remind them we're still here." The two men shared a bond forged in the fires of conflict, yet the war had left Frank grappling with demons that Kirk could hardly fathom. Each day was a battle for Frank, one that often left him feeling isolated and misunderstood. Kirk understood that all too well. He felt the weight of their shared experiences bearing down on him. They had fought together, but now they were fighting a different kind of war, one for recognition, for understanding, for their very identities. "Have you heard about the new war film they're making?" Frank asked, his voice laced with skepticism. "It's all glamour and glory, just like before. They'll never tell our stories." Kirk nodded, his frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. "It's like they want to forget the truth, the blood, the fear, the loss. They just want the hero's narrative, the one that sells." His gaze drifted to the towering buildings that loomed overhead, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. "But we're not just heroes. We're men who lived through hell." Frank's face grew solemn, and for a moment, the noise of the city faded away, leaving them in a shared silence. Kirk could sense the turmoil in Frank's heart, the desperation to be heard, to be seen, not just as a soldier, but as a human being with a story that mattered. Amidst the bustling streets, a woman appeared like a breath of fresh air. Mimi Sinclair, a journalist with an unwavering passion for the truth, moved through the crowd with purpose. Her dark curls bounced with each step, and her keen eyes scanned the faces of the veterans around her, searching for stories waiting to be told. Mimi had always believed that the voices of those who had fought should not be silenced, and she was determined to uncover the realities behind the glamorized narratives. "Hey, you two," she called out, her voice cutting through the noise. "I've been looking for you. I need your help." Kirk and Frank exchanged glances. "What's going on, Mimi?" Kirk asked, curiosity piquing. "I want to do a piece on veterans' experiences, the real stories, the ones Hollywood ignores." "I think you two would be perfect," she said, her enthusiasm infectious. Kirk felt a spark of hope igniting within him. "You mean, like interviews? Sharing what we went through?" "Exactly," Mimi replied, her eyes shining with conviction. "But I need your support. Hollywood is resistant to the truth. They want to maintain their sanitized image, and they'll fight to keep it that way." Frank's expression darkened at the mention of Hollywood's indifference. "They don't care about us. They just want the glory without any of the pain. Then we give them the pain, Kirk interjected, his voice steady. We show them what it really means to be a soldier. Mimi nodded, her resolve strengthening. Together, we can shed light on the stories that deserve to be heard. The world needs to know what you two have endured. As they stood there, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the pavement. The city around them pulsed with life, yet Kirk felt an urgency rising within him, a call to action. He knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for the first time since returning from the war, he felt a flicker of purpose igniting his spirit. Yet, lurking beneath that sense of purpose was a nagging fear. Would they be able to break through the barriers that Hollywood had erected? Would their voices be silenced once again in the pursuit of a more palatable narrative? As Kirk exchanged determined glances with Frank and Mimi, the weight of their shared mission settled upon them like a cloak, a heavy reminder of the sacrifices they had made and the battles they would continue to fight. In the heart of Los Angeles, amidst the chaos and the glamour, they were ready to reclaim their stories and ensure that the truth would not be forgotten. With the sun setting behind the horizon, the three of them stood united, ready to embark on a journey that would not only challenge the status quo but would also forge a path toward healing, understanding, and recognition, one story at a time. In the weeks that followed, the bustling streets of Los Angeles buzzed with the stories of returning heroes, yet Kirk Douglas felt more like a ghost wandering through a city that had forgotten him. The bright lights of Hollywood promised stardom, but to Kirk, they flickered with the harsh reality that he was but a minor player in an industry more interested in glamour than truth. Kirk had managed to secure a minor role in a war film titled Brothers in Arms, a project that he had hoped would bring him recognition. However, as he read through the script, a sense of frustration gnawed at him. The screenplay was laden with clichés, depicting soldiers as valiant figures unscathed by the horrors of battle. The scriptwriters had crafted a romanticized version of war, one that left Kirk feeling betrayed. He had seen the true face of combat, had witnessed the sacrifices of his fellow soldiers, and this portrayal felt like an insult to their memory. One afternoon, while rehearsing his lines in front of a mirror in his cramped apartment, Kirk's phone buzzed. It was a message from Mimi Sinclair, the tenacious journalist he had met at a veterans meeting. Her unwavering passion for uncovering the truth had resonated with him, and he found himself eager to hear what she had to say. "Can we meet? I have an idea that could change everything," her text read. Curiosity piqued, Kirk agreed to meet her at a small cafe tucked away from the glitz of Hollywood Boulevard. The cafe was a modest place, its walls adorned with photographs of old movie stars and faded posters of classic films. Kirk found Mimi seated at a corner table, her notepad filled with scribbles and thoughts. "Kirk, thank you for coming," she greeted him, her eyes bright with determination. "I want to collaborate on a feature that reveals the real stories of veterans like us. The Hollywood machine is pushing its sanitized version of war, and it's time we change that narrative." Kirk leaned forward, intrigued but cautious. "What do you have in mind?" "I want to interview veterans, gather their stories, and create something that portrays the truth of what we experienced. It's not just about the glory, it's about the pain, the trauma, and the camaraderie that the studios ignore. We need to show the world what really happened." Her words struck a chord within him. He had longed for a way to express the depth of his experiences and those of his friends, especially Frank Matthews, who had been struggling with the weight of his own memories. But as the excitement built, a cloud of doubt loomed over Kirk's thoughts. But what about the studios? They won't want this type of story. They want glamour, not reality. Mimi's expression turned serious. "I know it will be a fight. The editorial team at my paper is already pressuring me to drop my focus on veterans for something more commercially viable. But I can't just stand by and let their stories go untold." Kirk felt a pang of guilt. He had seen the struggle Frank faced daily, haunted by the ghosts of his past. "I'm in, but I need to talk to Frank first. He's not doing well, and I want to help him too." "Of course. We can't leave anyone behind," Mimi agreed, her resolve unwavering. As they parted ways, Kirk couldn't shake the feeling of urgency that pulsed through him. He needed to help Frank, but he also had to pursue this opportunity with Mimi. Their mission was crucial, not just for themselves but for countless veterans who had returned home to a society that wanted to forget. Later that evening, Kirk found himself in Frank's small apartment, a stark contrast to the bright lights of Hollywood. The walls were lined with memorabilia from their time in the service, but the room felt heavy with unspoken words and lingering shadows. Frank sat on the edge of his sofa, his gaze distant, as if he were reliving moments from the past. "Hey, buddy. How are you holding up?" Kirk asked, trying to break the silence. Frank shrugged, his face a mask of struggle. "You know how it is. Some days are better than others." Kirk took a seat beside him, searching for the right words. "Listen, I've partnered with a journalist, Mimi Sinclair. We want to gather the real stories of veterans and show the world what we went through. I want you to be a part of it." Frank's eyes narrowed, skepticism etched on his face. "You think anyone will care? Hollywood doesn't want the truth. They want heroes, not broken men." Kirk felt the weight of Frank's words, each one laced with bitterness. "I know it's hard, but it's our chance to change things. If we don't tell our stories, who will? You've got to let the world know what you've been through." Frank looked away, the silence stretching between them like an unbridgeable chasm. "Maybe I'm not ready for that, Kirk. Maybe I don't want to relive those memories." Kirk placed a comforting hand on Frank's shoulder. "You don't have to do it alone. We'll do this together. I can't just sit back and watch you struggle. You're my best friend." After a moment, Frank nodded, albeit reluctantly. "All right, I'll think about it. But you have to understand, it's not easy to talk about what happened." Kirk's heart sank as he realized the depth of Frank's pain. "I know, and I'll be here for you every step of the way. Just promise me you'll consider it." The conversation lingered in Kirk's mind as he left Frank's apartment. He felt torn, knowing that while he was pursuing his career, his friend was still grappling with the scars of war. The tension between their paths weighed heavily on him, but he also felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps together, they could find healing through their shared stories. Days turned into weeks, and as Kirk continued rehearsing for Brothers in Arms, he faced constant rejection from casting directors who seemed more interested in casting more glamorous actors than someone with his real-life experience. Each audition felt like a dismissal of his service, a reminder that Hollywood preferred heroes who fit a certain mold. The constant battle against the industry's expectations wore on him, but he remained steadfast in his commitment to Mimi's project. Meanwhile, Mimi faced her own struggles. Under pressure from her editor, she was forced to choose between her passion for veteran stories and the financial stability of her job. The calls for more marketable content loomed large, but Mimi held her ground, determined to stay true to her mission. She spent late nights researching, conducting interviews with veterans who were willing to share their truths, all while battling the fear of losing her job. As the weight of their respective challenges began to take a toll, Kirk found solace in the moments shared with Mimi. They spent hours discussing the stories of veterans, piecing together a narrative that felt raw and real. Each interview they conducted uncovered poignant tales of loss, courage, and resilience, stories that starkly contrasted with the glamorous depictions seen on screen. One evening, after a long day of interviews, Kirk and Mimi sat in her office, the dim light casting shadows on their faces. "Kirk, I think we're onto something here," Mimi said, her voice filled with excitement. "The stories we're gathering are powerful. They need to be shared with the world." Kirk nodded, but a shadow of doubt flickered in his eyes. "But will anyone listen? The studios have so much control over the narrative." Mimi leaned closer, her eyes fierce with determination. "We won't let them silence us. This is bigger than us, it's about every veteran who's been overlooked. We owe it to them to fight for their stories." As the weeks passed, Frank's mental health began to deteriorate further, leading to a traumatic event that shook Kirk to his core. One night, while Kirk was on his way to meet Mimi, he received a frantic call from Frank. "Kirk, I need your help. I can't do this anymore." Heart racing, Kirk rushed to Frank's apartment, where he found his friend in a distraught state, surrounded by reminders of the war that haunted him. I can't escape it, Kirk. The memories, they won't let me go. Kirk approached cautiously, his heart heavy with concern. Frank, you're not alone. I'm here. We can get through this together. But Frank's gaze was distant, lost in a whirlwind of thoughts. What's the point? You're chasing your dreams, and I'm just stuck. Kirk felt a surge of frustration mixed with empathy. Your story matters, Frank. You need to share it. Don't let the darkness win. We're working on something important that could help others like you. Frank shook his head, the pain evident in his eyes. I'm not ready for that. I don't want to be a burden. Kirk knelt beside him, desperate to reach his friend. You're not a burden. You're my best friend, and I want to help you. But you have to let me in. In the silence that followed, Kirk realized that the weight of their shared experiences had created a rift between them. Both men were grappling with their realities, and the chasm of unspoken trauma threatened to tear them apart. With his heart heavy and the looming deadlines of their project hanging over him, Kirk knew they had to confront their demons together. He needed Frank to find the strength to share his truth, but more importantly, he needed to be there for his friend as they both navigated the complexities of healing. As the story of their journey intertwined, they stood at a crossroads. All it would take is one more push to find the courage to confront their fears, together. And if you want to follow their journey and see how Kirk and Mimi navigate the challenges of sharing these untold stories, subscribe to our channel. Join us as we explore the resilience of veterans and the power of truth in a world that often prefers to forget. Don't miss the next chapter of this inspiring story. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the bustling streets of Los Angeles, a palpable tension hung in the air. The sound of clattering cameras and excited chatter filled the venue where Kirk Douglas stood, feeling like an imposter in a world that seemed to worship the glamour of war while ignoring its brutality. The premiere of his latest film, a war drama that promised to be exciting yet glossed over the harsh realities he had witnessed, was about to begin, and Kirk was caught between anticipation and dread. He looked out at the crowd, a sea of smiling faces and flashing lights, but all he could think about were the men who fought beside him, men like Frank Matthews, who were left to wrestle with the demons of their experiences. Frank's absence was a heavy weight on Kirk's heart. He had hoped that his friend would be there to share this moment, to stand together in solidarity, but the shadows of war had claimed Frank's spirit more than the enemy ever could. Just as the lights dimmed and the screening commenced, Kirk felt a surge of determination. Now was the time to speak out, to give a voice to those who had been silenced. With every passing minute, the urge grew stronger within him, a call to arms that resonated deeper than any script he had ever read. He couldn't let this opportunity slip away, not while the truth lay dormant beneath layers of celluloid fantasy. As the film played, depicting heroic acts and romanticized battles, Kirk's heart raced. He could see the faces of his fallen comrades, their laughter mingling with the screams of war. The film's portrayal felt like a betrayal, a sanitized version of a reality that had left so many wounded. The tension in his chest tightened as the credits began to roll, the audience erupting into applause. Kirk stood, staring at the screen, his mind racing through the stories he had gathered with Miriam Sinclair, the journalist who had dared to dig deeper. When the applause faded, the director took the stage, beaming with pride as he spoke of the film's significance. Kirk felt a fire igniting within him, a flame that urged him to act. He stepped forward, heart pounding, and grabbed the microphone from the director's hand, igniting gasps from the audience. "Thank you for being here tonight," he began, his voice steady but low. "But I have to say something that needs to be heard. This film, while beautifully crafted, does a disservice to the men and women who fought for our freedom. We are not just heroes in a glamorous story, we are real people who faced unimaginable horrors." The audience shifted, some confused, others intrigued. Kirk pressed on, the weight of his words pressing into the silence that enveloped the room. "I came back from the war with scars that run deeper than any bullet wound. My friend Frank, who fought alongside me, is not here tonight because he's battling his own demons, demons that Hollywood refuses to acknowledge." A murmur rippled through the audience, and Kirk could see faces turning to one another, whispering. He continued, his voice growing stronger, more impassioned. We owe it to those who fought to tell our stories authentically. We owe it to every veteran who has been forgotten. Hollywood needs to stop exploiting our experiences for profit while ignoring the real pain behind the heroics. At that moment, the doors swung open and Frank entered, his face pale and eyes filled with a mix of confusion and determination. He hesitated at the entrance, caught between the crowd and the stage. Kirk's heart ached at the sight of his friend, but he couldn't falter now. He could see Frank's struggle mirrored in the audience, a collective grappling with the truth. "Frank," Kirk called out, beckoning him forward. "Come up here. Share your story with us." The room fell silent, all eyes on Frank as he stepped into the light, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Kirk watched as his friend's expression shifted from uncertainty to resolve. Frank took a deep breath, fighting against the tide of memories threatening to drown him. "I didn't just fight in a war," he began, his voice shaky. "I lost friends. I witnessed things that haunt me every day. I came home expecting to be celebrated, but instead, I feel like a ghost." Kirk could see tears welling up in Frank's eyes, and it broke his heart. This was the truth, the raw, unfiltered reality that needed to be told. "I'm not the only one. So many veterans are suffering in silence, and Hollywood needs to stop pretending that we're all heroes just because we put on a uniform. We're human. We're scarred." The audience was transfixed, emotions swirling in the air. Kirk felt a wave of relief wash over him, knowing they were not alone in this fight. This was a pivotal moment, a turning point for both Frank and him. They were no longer just soldiers, they were advocates for their brothers and sisters in arms. As Frank continued to speak, a woman in the audience stood up, raising her hand. "My brother fought in the Pacific," she called out. "He won't talk about it. We need to hear these stories." A ripple of agreement spread through the crowd, and more hands shot up, voices rising in support of the veterans. Kirk and Frank exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. This was the connection they had been yearning for, the shared pain of countless veterans finding a voice. With every story shared, the audience transformed from passive viewers to active participants in a conversation that had been long overdue. But just as the momentum built, a studio executive barged in, red-faced and furious. "This is unacceptable. You're jeopardizing the whole production with this nonsense." He glared at Kirk, his face twisted in anger. Kirk stood firm, refusing to back down. "What's unacceptable is the way this industry exploits our experiences while ignoring the truth. We're not just characters in your story, we're real people with real lives." The executive scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. "You think this is going to change anything? Hollywood has a formula, and you're not part of it." Kirk felt a surge of anger, but it was quickly overshadowed by a sense of clarity. "Maybe it's time Hollywood's formula changed," he replied, the words resonating in the air. In that moment, a realization struck Miriam Sinclair as she stood at the back of the room, her heart racing. She had been compiling stories, gathering evidence of the studio's mistreatment of veterans, and now she had the missing piece, the passion, the raw emotion that would connect their struggles to the larger narrative. She rushed forward, interrupting the escalating confrontation. "Kirk, Frank," she said breathlessly, "I have something to share that ties everything together. The studio has been covering up reports of veterans being mistreated during auditions, denied roles, and even blacklisted for speaking out. They want to keep the truth hidden to protect their image." The crowd gasped, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Kirk's heart raced. This was the revelation they needed, the truth that could not be ignored. "We have to expose this," he said, looking at Miriam, then back at Frank. "We have to give a voice to those who have been silenced." Frank nodded, his spirit reigniting as he felt the strength of their unity. "I'm in," he declared, his voice stronger than before. "Let's make sure every veteran is heard." The executive's face paled, realizing the potential fallout of their actions. "You're making a mistake," he warned, but Kirk and Frank stood resolute, ready to fight for what was right. As the audience erupted into applause, a sense of hope filled the air. Kirk felt a weight lift from his shoulders, knowing that together, they could change the narrative. This was their story, and it was time to reclaim it. In that moment, surrounded by supporters and fellow veterans, Kirk Douglas realized that the fight was far from over, but they had taken the first step toward rewriting their fate. The truth was powerful, and they would not be forgotten again. As the final credits rolled on the documentary-style film that Kirk Douglas and Mimi Sinclair had painstakingly crafted, a new chapter was being written for both veterans and the Hollywood landscape. The screening had been a resounding success, filled with veterans and their families who had long felt invisible in a world that often glorified war without acknowledging its true cost. Kirk, standing at the front of the auditorium, felt a swell of pride mixed with relief wash over him. This wasn't just a film, it was a movement. The audience erupted into applause, but it was the tears streaming down the faces of the veterans that struck Kirk the hardest. He had once felt like a forgotten hero, a mere footnote in the annals of Hollywood's history. Yet, here he was, transforming his pain and experiences into something that resonated deeply with those who had walked a similar path. He looked over at Mimi, who was beaming with an infectious joy. Together, they had stood up against the Hollywood elite, and their collaboration had sparked a conversation that could no longer be ignored. In the days following the screening, the response was overwhelming. Newspapers and magazines began to feature stories on veterans, highlighting their struggles and triumphs. Public outcry surged for better representation of veterans in film, and a new narrative began to take shape, one that honored the realities of war rather than merely romanticizing it. Kirk had become not just a star but an advocate for his fellow service members, using his platform to effect change. Meanwhile, Frank Matthews, who had once been paralyzed by the shadows of his experiences, found a renewed sense of purpose. The film had opened doors not only for Kirk but also for Frank. With Kirk's support, he stepped into the light, sharing his story at veterans organizations and community events. Each time he spoke, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders, as though he was reclaiming pieces of himself that had been lost in the fog of war. The brotherhood that had once felt distant now surrounded him, offering a safety net that he had desperately needed. That night, as Kirk and Mimi celebrated their success at a small diner, Kirk couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. He had entered Hollywood as a young man seeking recognition, but he had emerged as a voice for the voiceless. He had learned that while he may have been a hero on the battlefield, true heroism lay in vulnerability, in sharing one's truth and fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. "Mimi," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I never thought I could matter this much. I spent so long feeling like a forgotten soldier, and now I feel like we're making a real difference." Mimi smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "You matter, Kirk. Your story matters. And together, we're proving that the experiences of veterans can't be silenced any longer. We're just getting started." As they raised their milkshakes in a toast, Kirk felt a sense of hope that had eluded him for years. The wounds of war would always be a part of him, but now, they were accompanied by the knowledge that he had the power to change the narrative. Communities across the country began to engage in discussions on veteran affairs, and soon, a grassroots movement emerged, advocating for better mental health resources and support systems for returning soldiers. Kirk, alongside Mimi and Frank, contributed to this movement, bridging the gap between Hollywood and the realities of those who served. They organized events that brought veterans together to share their stories, fostering a sense of community that had been sorely lacking. As the months passed, Kirk received calls from producers who were interested in collaborating on projects that highlighted the true experiences of veterans. He was determined to be a part of stories that not only entertained but educated. With each project, he was careful to ensure that the narratives remained authentic, never shying away from the gritty truths of war. The industry began to shift, slowly but surely, as more filmmakers recognized the importance of telling stories that honored the sacrifices made by those who had served. One evening, as Kirk sat in his modest apartment reflecting on the journey that had unfolded, he received a call from a major studio. They wanted him to star in a film based on a true story, one that depicted the harrowing experiences of a young soldier in World War II. This time, there was no glossing over the realities, no romanticizing of the battles fought. This was a chance to tell a story that echoed his own, and for Kirk, it felt like a full-circle moment. Mimi continued to write about veterans' issues, her articles gaining recognition and contributing to the ongoing dialogue about mental health and support systems. She often collaborated with Kirk, ensuring that their voices were heard not just in the entertainment industry, but also in political discussions. Together, they advocated for policies that would provide better care for veterans, making sure their sacrifices were never forgotten again. As the credits rolled on another successful project, Kirk stood on stage, accepting an award for his contributions not only to film but also to the veteran community. He looked out into the audience, filled with veterans, their families, and supporters. Tears welled in his eyes as he spoke, the words flowing from a place deep within. We fought for our country, and when we returned, we found ourselves fighting another battle, the battle for recognition, for understanding, and for healing. I stand here today not just as an actor but as a proud veteran. Our stories matter. They deserve to be told, and they deserve to be heard. The applause rang out, echoing the sentiments of those who had long felt silenced. Kirk's evolution from a struggling actor to a champion for veterans was a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of speaking one's truth. In the spirit of this journey, Kirk and Mimi decided to launch a new initiative, a foundation dedicated to supporting veterans, providing resources for mental health care, and fostering creative projects that told authentic stories of service members. They hoped to inspire others to share their narratives, creating a ripple effect that would change the perception of veterans in society. As they stood together, looking out at the crowd of supporters, Kirk realized that he had finally found his place, not just in Hollywood, but in the hearts of those who had once felt forgotten. He had come back to fight again, and this time, he was not alone. And so, as you watch this story unfold, remember that every voice has the power to inspire change. If you found Kirk's journey compelling, join us in spreading awareness about veterans' issues and the importance of sharing their stories. Like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content that highlights the unsung heroes of our time. Click the notification bell to stay updated on our latest stories, and together, let's ensure that no veteran is ever forgotten again. The fight for recognition continues, and every share, every conversation, every story matters. Let's keep the momentum going. Thank you for joining us on this journey.